Hi, friends. Here we are with episode 10, part 2, one of my favorite episodes that I've ever done. This is Taylor, and my historical doomed to fail subject for this one is the Kennedy family. So I go all the way from Joseph Kennedy, who was the U.S. ambassador to the UK right before World War II, and then all the way through to what some of the current Kennedys are up to. And this was even before RFK Jr. was running for president as a Democrat or not, but yeah, you know, we'll get there. So hope you enjoy. Questions, concerns, thoughts, doomtofailpod@gmail.com. Please share with your friends. Please help us grow. We'd love to keep doing this. So I appreciate your support. Have a great holiday season, and we will be back early December with new episodes. Thank you.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And wild times.
So, Bars.
Taylor.
Today, I know that in our theme song, it's JFK, and we're thinking Jackie and him, but actually, I'm gonna go all the Kennedys, and talk about the Kennedy curse. So there's so many bad things that happened to the Kennedys. So I'm gonna kind of go through them, and it's gonna be a little out of order, but it's also going to be kind of like reading the Bible, because I'm going to be like, Jack, son of blah, 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 because I'm going to go person by person and just tell you the bad things that happened to them. There were
A lot of bad
9
things.
Kennedy children, a lot of bad things. There were 9 Kennedy children. They all have tragic stories. Kennedy women aren't as cursed as the men. Take that for what you will. And outside of these tragedies, there are plenty of nonprofits and good political decisions and things that they did, but a lot of bad things, like not even bad things that they did, bad things that happened to them. So a lot of things that you could definitely, lean towards there being some sort of curse. The Kennedys are, as you know, an American political family. There've been very few years in the past 100 years that a Kennedy has not held public office. There's almost always someone there, and almost always federally as well. So for my research, I did a lot of just like compiling from Wikipedia, but also I read a James Patterson book on the Kennedys. So it was like a book that he wrote that's nonfiction, but about their stories. So some of the more dramatic things. I'm going to start with the parents of the Kennedy children and kind of go from there. The dad of JFK, the patriarch, is Joseph Patrick Kennedy. As you can tell, he's very Irish and very Catholic. That's a very Irish name. Joseph Patrick Kennedy was born in 1888. He's from a political family in Boston. He made his money in the stock market. He would do these things called stock pools with other investors. That was a little shady, and he shorted a lot of stock before the crash in 1929. So by 1935, in the height of the Depression, in today's dollars, the Kennedys were worth $3.5 billion.
Whoa.
So they were fine.
I
They
did
had a
not know
lot of
that.
fucking money. Uber rich. Totally. And JFK, one of the problems that he had running for president is that he had no idea of what people had been through during the Depression. He just wasn't involved, you know? So Joe definitely had connections to the mafia. At one point, he leaves his family and goes to Hollywood to try to open a studio. He invested in a lot of movies, like kind of like B movies, like cowboy movies. He had a long affair with the actress Gloria Swanson. And also, I'll mention this kind of periodically, but every single Kennedy man had a ton of affairs. And it's just not interesting because everyone was doing it. But
Yeah, I would have figured as
Joe was
much.
the dad and did it a ton. He, after Prohibition, he worked with James Roosevelt to sell liquor, so he knew like the Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt's kids. He definitely had connections to the mafia, so he was doing some shady things. And all this time, he's still very, very Catholic. He holds several political positions. He was president of the SEC. And then the big one he does is from 1938 to 1940, Joseph Kennedy is the ambassador to England, which is an interesting time to be the ambassador to England because right as we're getting into World War II. and he was definitely the wrong guy to do that. He was a little bit of a like, I don't know, maybe a wet noodle about it, or maybe he just was like too rich to care about it. But he was like, why do we have to fight? Why don't we just see what this Hitler guy has to say?
Yeah, I do.
And
I
while,
do
yeah,
remember some stuff around his. He had like a weird affinity for eugenics, from what I recall,
yeah.
and so
Oh, that
this,
makes sense.
yeah, this kind of falls in line.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense because all the Kennedys like look the same and have like the same thing. I mean, I feel like it kind of fits into that. But he was like, he tried to meet with Hitler twice and, never actually got the meeting. But one British MP said of him, he said, quote, "We have a rich man, untrained in diplomacy, unlearned in history and politics, who is a great publicity seeker and who apparently is ambitious to be the first Catholic president of the United States." So like no one took him seriously up there. And he was also anti-Semitic, unsurprisingly. And the things he said are bad, but generally it was like Hitler has some good ideas. What's the problem?
You
You know.
know what's
Um,
weird about all that is at that time in history, Irish people were very much looked down upon in the U.S. Like they were like yeah, they were a minority, right?
he's definitely from a minority. Yeah,
And it's just interesting, like he doesn't see the irony in like his own belief system
yeah,
and how people treat him directly.
totally, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just, part of his personality. He was also like a very strict father. He raised his children to always win. They, had to be the best, and he basically raised them all to be president. That was his goal. He dies of complications of a stroke in 1969. So the timeline's going to be a little weird, but he dies in 1969. He married Rose Kennedy. She was born Rose Fitzgerald in 1890. She actually died in 1995 when she was 104, which is some of these women
That's crazy.
live
I
very
can't
long
believe it
lives.
was that recent
Yeah,
in time.
I know. So she was also very, very Catholic. She met Joe at parties in like a rich society. She devoted her life to her children. That was Rose's thing. She was, a grandmother, a great grandmother, a mother. That was her number one thing that she did. And Jackie Kennedy, described her mother-in-law while in a letter to a priest. She said, "I don't think Jack's mother is too bright, and she would rather say a rosary than read a book." So a little bit of like internal criticism about how much she relied on being Catholic for things, but that was Rose. She was the
Ta-
mom. So
Taylor,
obviously, yeah,
how, how do you think me and you would do at one of those parties?
that I totally agree. I think we talked about this before. Like, I do not fit in. You
Yeah,
would see me like a sore freaking thumb. People would ask me for a drink because they would think I worked there. I don't think I could fit in.
it's the laugh. I don't think I could nail the laugh. I think because I feel the laugh is so like yeah. It's just I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know. I'm too gruff. I think I'm a little bit too gruff for that.
yeah. I got the shadow of, I don't know, not being rich my whole life that you
I
can
know.
see with
Yeah,
my
yeah.
face. Yeah, no, it's definitely a society that like I don't fit in and don't know anything about.
We can be the
But
help.
they, yeah, exactly. So now I want to talk about all nine of their children. I'm going to do it in order, and it'll be maybe confusing, but some stories that maybe you haven't heard, we'll get to. The firstborn son is Joseph Kennedy Jr. He was born in 1915. He was the one who was going to be president. He was super handsome, like they're all handsome, whatever. He was like super handsome. He was older brother. He was really being groomed to be president of the U.S. by his family. He was also anti-Semitic and had some of his dad's ideas. There's like a story that was in the James Patterson book where Joe Jr. was working with a professor at school who was Jewish, and he was like, "Yeah, it's too bad that that guy has to go, but in general, it's fine." Like not great. So, but he was even though he was very active in World War II, he married an actress, Sheila Rauch, in 1940. They had no children because in 1994, in 1944, while serving as a naval pilot during World War II, Joe went on a mission that he didn't have to go on, and it was a little bit like the plane may not have been ready, but he was like, "I'm brave and I'm going to go on this." He had already done some pretty dangerous missions in World War II, and his plane exploded over England. So he died in 1944. Obviously super sad to have like the older brother, first tragedy of many that Joe Jr. died that way. The second son is John F. Kennedy. He was born in 1917. He was a sick child. He had back injuries after being injured in World War II. So a big part of his story is how many drugs he was on when he was president. Have you heard those stories?
I have. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
apparently that injury was like almost debilitating.
Yeah. The kid to wear a back brace and like, so, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the person in charge is like pretty fucked up. So super interesting. If people had known that, maybe like he wouldn't have gotten as far as he did, but he was, in a lot of pain for a lot of his life. But
Yeah,
he
so he was
served
on he was
as
on
a
like
commander.
he would have been on like opiates, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. He had like literally the doctor they called Dr. Feelgood was his doctor.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah,
Okay.
it was absolutely on a whole bunch of shit. Yeah. It was like, a pill to go to sleep, a pill to wake up, a pill to do this, da da da, lots of shots, those kind of things.
He sounds like a
People
Burning
do.
Man attendee.
Yeah. Um, he was injured in World War II, like we said. He was a commander of a patrol torpedo craft, and I think he saved a couple of people when it got like torpedoed. He is the only president to have the Marine Corps Medal and the Purple Heart. Either of those. Like he's really like probably one of the most decorated presidents besides like Eisenhower.
It's actually pretty cool.
He married. Yeah, it's pretty cool. 'Cause it seems like he did a good job over there, especially like after his brother died. He still went over there, which I think was pretty brave. I know that he like couldn't get in immediately because of his injuries and his like um, history of like being kind of sickly, but he ended up getting in. However, that happened and was actually pretty heroic in there. So he married Jacqueline Lee Bouvier in 1953. She was also a socialite, but she was like doing okay. She had a job as a reporter, and when he proposed to her and she left without answering, she went to England for Queen Elizabeth's coronation. So she had a pretty cool job, and she was sort of reluctant to marry him. He already had a lot of girlfriends, and he didn't plan to stop having girlfriends. That was kind of part of it as well. But they got married anyway, and JFK and Jackie have this kind of like perfect looking marriage. They have 4 kids. They have Arabella is stillborn in 1956. So that's one tragedy of them for their kids. Caroline is still alive. She's still involved in politics. She has 3 kids. She's still, with us. JFK Jr. Can you picture JFK Jr.?
Yeah, I remember this
Yeah.
guy.
So he was born in 1960. He was 2 when his dad died, and he was always in the public eye. Like there's like a picture of him in his like little like nice coat at his dad's funeral. So super sad, obviously. In the 90s, he was like a political playboy. He was a lawyer, but he like barely made it. He like barely scooted by law school. All these guys went to like Harvard and Stanford and all that and Yale and Um,
So
but he
so
started a political magazine called George. You heard of that? Okay.
yeah, yeah. So that's like one of my favorite facts about him actually is so full disclosure, the first time I took the bar exam I failed and passed the second time.
Mm,
But when you fail it, it feels awful. Like you feel like everybody's moving on to greater and bigger things and you got to go back to the books and try again. And
hmm.
knowing that he failed the bar a shitload. Like he failed like somewhere
Yeah.
between 3 and 5 times. Like he had a really
Hmm.
hard time getting past it. And it's one of those things that money is never gonna get you there completely. You got to kind of do it on your own. And so I
Yeah.
leaned on that a little bit. I was like, well, if someone like that can keep failing, then it's all good.
And it's all good. Totally. That's good. Yeah. So he, became a lawyer, but he was really mostly like a political playboy, like I said. He started a political magazine called George, which was sexy politics. Like the first issue had what's her face, like the really famous model from the 90s, like dressed
Moss.
like George Washington. No, not Cindy Crawford. Kate
Ah,
Moss was in it too. Like they were all in it. That was like the circles he was in. He's on Oprah. There's an episode of Seinfeld where like Elaine sees him at the gym and she's like really excited. He's like the sexiest man alive. He's also like, I don't know if this is what you picture when you picture him, but he has like a very hairy chest. And I feel like I don't see that on the cover of magazines anymore.
I
Or like I
didn't
haven't in a long time.
didn't picture that.
Did you picture that? But I pictured him as like 90s sexy, like Tom Selleck, like a hairy chest and a lot of hair. So he was like the most eligible bachelor, sexiest man alive, all those things. And I think he probably struggled with it a little bit. He's one thing that it said in the James Patterson book that like someone was like, "Oh, everybody sees you and they know who you are." And he was like, "Everybody looks at me and they know who my dad is, but I don't know who my dad is." Like he didn't get to meet him. He didn't get to really see him. So
I
that's sad.
I can imagine that on the outside looking in, you're like, what a charmed life, right? Like you're uber rich, you're
Hmm.
Kennedy, you're good looking, living. I think he was in New York or something, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think on the outside it could seem like it's all rainbows and sunshine, but there's got to be a lot of like,
Hmm.
how do you create your own life when you're like your
Pretty
dad
big
is,
shadow, especially for him. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like they
They've
call
all
what
gone
didn't
for
they
sure.
call his mom and dad like the king and queen of Camelot at one point? Like they were,
Yeah. It was like Camelot was like a perfect marriage of power and all these things. And yeah.
yeah, that's got to be tough to grow up in that.
Yeah. Totally. So JFK Jr. marries another rich woman named Carolyn Bessette. She was also like not super stoked on marrying him, but then she did, and they were like a dream couple of the 90s. And it sounds like they had like a lot of problems and they were maybe going to get a divorce. And another thing about JFK Jr. is he always wanted to fly. Like he was obsessed with like planes. Like when his dad, even like up until he was 2, when his dad would like go somewhere on a trip, come back with a toy plane, and like he just loved it. And Jackie told him not to learn how to fly, but he did anyway. And so in 1999, he and Caroline are probably separated, but they're going to a wedding anyway. So he says, I'm going to take you and your sister to this wedding. We're going to fly out of New York and go like up the coast. And he should not have done this. He was not certified. He was not complete with all of his training for being a pilot. His ankle was broken, and you need 2 feet to be able to do what he needed to do in that plane. So you need feet to do it too. But his ankle is broken. And it's the same thing. It's like this attitude that I can't remember what it's called, but that like pilots say like a gotta get there attitude, which is kind of what happened to Kobe Bryant as well, where it's like
Yeah,
the pilot is like, "Oh no, I can do this. I have to get there. Like I'm invincible." And
yeah.
he's you know what I mean? So he got up in this like little plane and he probably lost sight of the horizon because it was really dark. So he couldn't see the horizon. And he had also like he almost hit like an American or some airline like passenger plane first.
Jeez.
And then he was kind of like flying erratically and then he like disappeared off of radar and they found the plane like 2 days later. So he also like I don't know, there's a Malcolm Gladwell book where I can't remember which one it is, but where he talks about this, losing sight of the horizon thing. And he's in a plane with a pilot, and the pilot's trying to explain to him what might have happened. And he says, like, okay, the pilot says, I'm going to point the plane down and put us in a spiral, and you're not going to feel it. And because of like the force. And Malcolm Gladwell's like, okay. And then like a minute later, he's like, okay, you can start. And the pilot was like, we're already doing it. Like he
That's
couldn't tell.
crazy. That's
So like
nuts.
that might have been what had happened. Like he was like, everything's fine, but just imagine. So JFK Jr. dies in a terrible way in 1999. The fourth child of Jackie and Jack is a son named Patrick who lived for 2 days. He was born in 1963. So pretty tragic. Their kid situation. In The other obviously thing that you know about is in 1963, we all know JFK is the president. They're in Dallas, just like you. The Dallas Morning News hates him. They wrote an article about how much they don't like him. In the car in Dallas, the governor's wife says, "See, Dallas loves you. Texas loves you," to him. And right after she says that, he's shot from the 6th floor of a building by a crazy man named Lee Harvey Oswald. Both this and another assassination we'll talk about. Like, I wish it was a conspiracy, but it's just a crazy guy. Like a really radicalized person. Lee Harvey Oswald like wanted to defect to Russia. They wouldn't let him in. He wanted to be a socialist. All these things. So just kind of a crazy person.
Um,
There is a theory that
Taylor, yeah, sorry, the overlap because there's some lag in the Wi-Fi, so I don't mean to keep interrupting. It's just there's a lag there.
no
Um,
worries. Go ahead.
did you ever listen to the last podcast on the left about JFK?
Yes.
Do you remember what the theory
You
was
talk about
of
the Secret
how?
Service?
Yes.
Yes.
I do believe that.
I
I
love
do
it.
think the
You tell
Secret
it.
Service.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, or the theory is that what actually ended up happening was Oswald did set off the events, but the actual bullet that tore JFK's head off, the theory is, came from the Secret Service agent behind the president's limousine. So Oswald fired the
Mm-hmm.
first shot, hit the ground, fired the second shot, hit the president in the neck and Connolly in the shoulder, and then at that
Mm-hmm.
point, the Secret Service unsafetied the gun to try and do something. The car lurched, and the guy fell backwards. And
Mm-hmm.
there he is that he shot him in the back of the head that way. So, anyways,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
random aside.
I love that. I think that's fun that they were like super hungover and just were like not doing their job well. Also, like it's weird because the way that Kennedy moves when he gets shot, like it's
Yeah,
confusing to people, but it's also because he's wearing a back brace. So
yeah, the whole thing.
you could that could be your job. You could just learn about it. That could be all you do. Um, but man, fucking poor Jackie. She is holding his brains in her hand and like brings to the doctor and is like, here, I have these brains. Like absolutely horrifying. That evening she's on Air Force One with his body. She's still covered in blood. She's wearing her famous pink Chanel suit covered in blood while LBJ gets sworn in on Air Force One. So a really fucking horrifying situation. Um, Jackie remarries pretty quickly to a Greek man named Aristotle Onassis. Aristotle's daughter is like, do not marry this fucking woman. She is cursed. While they're married, Aristotle's son dies in a plane crash. And they separate, but they never divorce because he passes away. So by 45, she's been a widow twice and then does not get married again. Jackie dies of cancer in 1994. So she lives like 30 or so years more than Jack did.
Wow.
Tragedy. That could be your job. Your whole life could be about those two. But let's move on to the third child. Maybe the most worst story is of Rosemary.
Oh,
Rosemary was born on September 3rd, 1918. I wrote poor fucking Rosemary Kennedy.
yeah.
Like, this is the worst. Her birth is an actual horror story. Um, her mother was giving birth. The midwife wanted to wait for the doctor, but the doctor couldn't get there because of, like, I don't know, a storm, something happened. So they had to wait 2 hours. And the midwife, instead of just delivering the baby, kept her in the birth canal. So made the labor 2 hours longer than it needed to be. And she was like literally holding the baby's head so the baby would not come out. And like, I
So
cannot think of a single
crazy.
fucking reason to do that. Take the baby out. But
Yeah.
because of that, she was definitely deprived of oxygen. And so I think that was like something that like made her a little bit disabled from that experience. Yeah, she wasn't
Yeah.
like a terrible person. She just had trouble in academics. She couldn't really read. She had special tutors. She was also super depressed because people treated her differently. All these things about her. When she is like in her 20s, her parents send her to a convent, but she keeps leaving the convent at night because she wants to like have a life. Like she's a grown woman who is just has some like problems with reading and comprehension. It's not like nothing's terribly wrong with her.
She,
And because of that,
she
her parents are worried that she could like get an STD or get pregnant or something. And they're just like pretty embarrassed of her. They don't want her
she
to do anything stupid. And I'm sure fucking Joe, yeah,
she sounds just precocious.
yeah,
That's it.
like nothing terrible, exactly. And when she was 23, her father decided to have her lobotomized, which was experimental at best. It was never like a great procedure. And as far as do you want to tell everybody what a lobotomy is? I feel like you know.
Oh yeah. So this is where they take a ice pick through your eye socket.
Jesus Christ.
They push your eye socket, your eyeball out of the way, stick the ice pick up into the frontal cortex of your brain, and just kind of wiggle it around a bunch, and turn
And
you,
hope for the best.
hope for the best, basically turning you into like a very close approximation of a zombie.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what happened to Rosemary. After her lobotomy, she ends up with the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. And her family institutionalized her, and many of them never saw her again. Um, when Joe Sr., her dad, died, they did start bringing her around again. Like, oh, great. And, bringing her to things and that. She was always in like a nice facility, but still. And she died of natural causes at 85. So she lived like most of her life.
Like
after this horrifying procedure happened to her.
it wasn't that long
Yeah,
ago that she died, right?
she died in 2005. Yeah,
So there was a person living in 2005 who had their brain scrambled with an ice pick to the like. That sounds like
yeah,
it's nuts.
it's absolutely horrifying. So poor Rosemary. Um, so she was the third. The fourth Kennedy child is Kathleen Kick Kennedy, so they call her Kick. She married, she was really close to Joe Jr., her older brother. She married a Lutheran Englishman, the Marquess of Hartington. And it was a big deal, obviously, because he was Lutheran and they're very Catholic. And they married, and he died pretty soon after they were married. He was shot by a German sniper during World War II, which is super sad. They had no children because he died so quickly after their marriage. And then she, Kick herself, died in a plane crash on May 13th, 1948. So another
Stay
just like
away from
short, tragic life.
planes. Like just stop
Don't go
it.
on planes, 100%. Absolutely. So Kick had a short and sad life. Number five is Eunice Kennedy. So Eunice was born in 1921. She married Robert Sargent Shriver in 1953. He was the first director of the Peace Corps, so he did a lot of good things. They had five kids. Robert, Maria, Timothy, Mark, and Anthony. You'll remember Maria, she married Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
She was the first lady of California. They got divorced after it was discovered that he had a child with their maid, which I'm sure was not his only affair. Their son Patrick is an actor. Their daughter Catherine is married to the worst Chris. She's married to Chris Pratt, who
Why do
is
you why do you
the
dislike
worst
Chris Pratt?
Chris. I'm not the only one who says this, but of all the Hollywood Chris's, Chris Pratt is the worst Chris. And I think a lot of it is because he's like super religious and like very like Jesus help me do this, which is really annoying. And a lot of people just like think he's very like haughty. Like when you see him and Catherine together, she has these like this like weird smile, like they just like seem kind of weird. I found a self-help book she wrote in like the 90s about like, hey, my life is so hard, blah blah blah. And like I don't know. I know we
What?
said JFK Jr.'s life must have been hard, but also fuck you. So like, I don't know. Like they don't. She
How
doesn't seem
does
great.
yeah, how
Um,
does she get a pass on having a hard life?
I don't know. I don't know. And then like, oh, one thing about Chris Pratt, what I also think like maybe he's a great actor because like Owen Grady in Jurassic Park is super sexy, but if you like look at Chris Pratt in real life, you're like, ew.
I think that's the
I can't
worst
explain that.
character. Like I really
People
hate
get it.
that character.
You get it,
Yeah.
everyone. But so that's one of Eunice's granddaughters. Um, Eunice was like a mother to a lot of the Kennedy children. She was, stayed, with the family a lot. And one thing that she did that is fantastic that, one of the many like things that they do that's actually like really good and a lot of philanthropy is she started the Special Olympics in honor of Rose, of her sister.
That's
And
right.
I went to the Special Olympics opening ceremony a few years ago in LA. I don't know how we got tickets to it, but it was beautiful. I cried the whole freaking time. And Maria Shriver spoke, and it's really great that they did that. So that's super
That
cool
is awesome.
for Eunice. Yeah. So the sixth child is Patricia. She was born 1924. Oh, also Eunice died in 2009. So she also lived to be very old. Patricia is the number six. She was born 1924. She died in 2006. She married actor Peter Lawford, and I don't know if you know who that is, but I know
Mm,
him from Easter Parade. Easter Parade is one of my favorite movies, and so like I was just like really excited that anyone got to marry Peter Lawford because I've always thought he was so handsome. But he sounds like kind of a douche, you know.
I don't even recognize
Um,
his
he,
picture.
yeah, he
Oh, it's
was
old
like
timey.
a not cool. They called him the least talented member of the Rat Pack. Like he wasn't really in the Rat Pack, but he was like on the outside of it because Joe was trying to get the Rat Pack and like people in the mafia to get people to vote for JFK. So they had like Peter Lawford like go in and try to be cool. And Frank Sinatra was like, "Yeah, I totally want to hang out with JFK," but he ended up having to hang out with Peter Lawford, and he was like really disappointed, which is funny.
It would be
Um,
sad if that's your claim to fame
so
is I'm the saddest Rat Pack member.
I know it's so funny. So they have four kids, and they do get divorced eventually, but they have four kids. And like the divorce stuff, I couldn't figure it all out. Some of them get divorced, some of them don't. It's also weird because they're Catholic and like you can't get divorced. All these things. Patricia and Peter Lawford do get divorced. The only one of the four kids with a Wikipedia page is Christopher. He was an actor, and he was super involved in drugs as a teen. He got arrested for impersonating a doctor to get drugs. And his cousin, who we'll talk about later, ODs, he sobered up and he was sober for 33 years. He did a lot of activism for drug awareness, but he died of a heart attack when he was 63. So it sounds like he turned his life around after all that bad stuff happened. So that's Patricia and Peter's son. Number 7 is Robert F. Kennedy. He was born on November 20th, 1925. I wrote Bobby, Bobby Kennedy.
Oh yeah,
He married Ethel Skakel, and they had 11 children, which is too many children,
I
just way too many
know.
children.
I know one of those kids that I think you're going to talk about because the name
Okay,
Skagel sounds really familiar.
there's a Skakel story. It's her nephew, but we'll get there. So they had Kathleen. Kathleen was Lieutenant Governor of Maryland from 1995 to 2003. She's still involved in politics. Her daughter, Maeve, died in 2002 in like the weirdest way. So her daughter was 40 years old, and her son went on a canoe out on a lake, and they both just disappeared. They found their bodies later. Like something happened, and they both died, which is terrible.
Wild.
They have Joseph, who's blonde. I don't know, I feel like not many of them are blonde. He's an energy businessman. He got married in 1979 and he tried to get divorced in 1993, but he was like, I'm Catholic, I can't get divorced. He tried to get it annulled by saying that when he was married, he was in a bad mental state, but like it's been 15 years. Can't get it annulled, you know? And his wife wrote a book called, this is so sad, called Shattered Faith, A Woman's Struggle to Stop the Catholic Church from Annulling Her Marriage. Like, everybody calm
Stop
down.
it. Like you're how important do you think you are? Like
For fucking real. But but that's like again how Catholic everybody is. Joseph had 2 sons, they're twins. One of them is a ginger, and he's currently the ambassador to North Ireland. This looks like a Kennedy with red hair, which is kind of delightful.
interesting.
So number 3 is RFK Jr. And so there is this woman who writes for Vanity Fair who writes a newsletter. I actually haven't gotten it in a while, so I wonder if she still works there. But her name is Bess Levin, and she's fantastic. Like I just like love reading her stuff. And she called Robert F. Kennedy Jr. an example of an apple falling as far from the tree as possible, which I
Oh,
love.
that's kind of mean.
Um,
Why?
Let me tell you. So he did a lot of activism, a lot of environmental stuff. So he worked a lot on that. He was been married a couple times. Ex-wife actually killed herself, which is pretty tragic. And I think that happened after some of his affairs were like out in public, which is a bummer. But then he did the bad thing. He is anti-vaccination, like real hard, like all of them.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's one
Yep.
of those people that is like, do your own research and do it on your own schedule. And it's like, oh my God, I'm not a fucking doctor. I'm listening to my doctors. What are you talking about? So he has done all this stuff about vaccines connected to autism, which is not true. He doesn't like the flu vaccine. And then, of course, he hates the COVID vaccine. He literally wrote a book called The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health. He's an
No, so
idiot.
he's a nut job.
Yeah. And I wrote, he sucks. Fuck that guy. So fuck you, RFK Jr. I hope you're listening. Then 4th kid of their 11 is David. David has a fun story because he almost drowned while RFK was running for president, and he saved him, and it was very heroic. David was the only member of the family to stay up late on the news as his dad, RFK, accepted the nomination for the Democratic president. And so he's the one who saw the news about his dad being shot before everybody else did, which is terrible. He was 12.
That's awful.
And he turned to drugs like after that. He got into a car accident. There's so much drunk driving. Just assume that like everybody's been drunk driving this whole time. David got in a car accident. His girlfriend was paralyzed. He was injured. And in 1984, he died of a drug overdose. So he was very troubled. I think probably obviously from his dad being assassinated and him being like the first one to see it and all of that.
Yeah.
The next kid is Mary Courtney. She married an Irishman. They had one daughter named Saoirse, and she died of a drug overdose in 2019. So another drug overdose
Jeez.
death. Then there's Michael, and Michael is a nerd who looks like a cartoon of his dad. He looks like Bobby Kennedy if you like took your hands on Bobby Kennedy's head and stretched it out an inch. Like he has really long teeth. It's like a lot.
I'm gonna look
He
him up.
married Frank Gifford's daughter. Look him up. That's Michael Kennedy.
Dude, he's mostly
But don't
teeth
read it.
by body weight.
Mostly teeth. Yeah. And
Wow.
he's in the news because he married Frank Gifford's daughter, who's like the football guy. And while he was married, he had an affair with his babysitter. His wife woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed, so she went to go find him and found him in the room of their babysitter who was only 16.
Ugh.
And because 16 was the age of consent or is in Massachusetts at the time or whatever, he was able to like get off of being like actually in trouble for it, but like he was definitely sleeping with her before then. Like he was absolutely like grooming and a predator and slept with his or raped his 14-year-old nanny. And he blamed it on the booze. He said, I don't drink. This was in 1997. He blamed it on alcohol and drugs. And then he was like, I'm going to get sober. And he got sober for like maybe 6 months. And on New Year's Eve, 1997, so the same year that it came out that he was sleeping with the nanny, he died in a ski accident. And like, this is one of the dumbest fucking ways to die. So there's this dumb thing that the Kennedys do that the parks and ski resorts have told them not to do, which is playing ski football, which
Oh
is
my
playing
God.
football on skis with no pads and no fucking helmet.
Yeah.
So Michael Kennedy, that's just is like playing ski football with his family. He catches the ball and he hits a tree and he dies like almost immediately.
It's like
So
it's almost like they have no
just don't fucking do it.
understanding of like who they are. Like
But like you should because everybody dies. There's
yeah,
no
like
like
the universe is trying to
reason
take you
you
out.
should be more scared.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
always there's a target on your back anyways, and then you play
Yeah.
football on skis, which like skiing on its own, people die just doing that. You don't have to make it more complicated.
Totally. Why are you even like pushing even further? So Michael dies 1997. The seventh kid is Mary Carey. She did a lot of activism. She seemed fine until I saw that she was married to Andrew Cuomo, which was probably not great.
Oof,
So
oof.
there's that. She did get in trouble for drunk driving in 2012. Another son, Christopher, seems fine, lives in Chicago. There's Matthew Douglas. I can't find anything on them. And Rory, they're just rich kids. Rory is a filmmaker, like rich people are. Like Sofia Coppola. Sure, fine. So, as you know, so those are all the kids. That's what happened to the kids. After JFK was assassinated, RFK ran for president. And as we know, he had no Secret Service protection. That was not a thing for people running for president yet. And he was in LA accepting the Democratic nomination when he was killed. It was a lone gunman. His name was Sirhan Sirhan. He was just denied parole like 2 days ago. Again, he'll be denied parole forever. I listened to a long time ago an entire podcast about it where this guy was talking to his uncle who like devoted his life to trying to find the conspiracy behind it. There's no conspiracy. It was just a crazy person.
So
It sucks.
is there a why to?
I can't remember the why. I'll look it up, but I can't remember. But like, yeah,
Well, it's
it was just
unjustified either
like
way.
when he died, Ethel was 8 months pregnant with Rory, so she had her a couple days after, which is terrible. And just a couple other like tragedies around RFK and Ethel's family. In 1955, Ethel's parents were killed in a plane crash, just like coincidentally. And then also the Skakel thing is her nephew, Michael Skakel, was involved. He was convicted of killing his neighbor, Martha Moxley, and he did it in like 1960. This like we can maybe talk about it later, but it's like a story where like she went to a party in like a rich people's house and he lived with his dad who wasn't really taking good care of them and these like rich kids who could do whatever they want, and he ended up beating Martha Moxley to death with a golf club, and he got convicted like in 2013, so like 50 years later
Wow.
he was convicted of that, but he was definitely also a murderer. So there's that. Another one in number 8 of 11 is of 9. What am I doing? Okay, these are the last ones. Number of the 9 original Kennedy children. So Jean Kennedy is number 8. She was born 1928. She died in 2020. She was the last one to die, the last of the kids. She was the ambassador to Ireland for a little while. She married a man named Stephen Edward Smith. They had 2 sons and adopted some daughters. She had a son, Michael, who was, I think also like something bad happened to him. I can't remember. It's so many things.
It's just
But it
blending
was terrible.
together.
Her
It was a
it's
ski
just blending
thing. It was an
together.
airplane. It was
Yeah.
some rich
He
person
knows.
way of dying.
Exactly. Her husband cheated on her a ton, and so like their marriage didn't last very long. Like togetherness, but they stayed married until his death. She was pretty embarrassed about it and kind of like hid it and just kind of like let it happen. Her son William was involved in a rape case. He was ultimately acquitted, but he had been convicted of rape as well. So some bad things happened to her too. And then we have the last of the Kennedy children. Do you know the last one? Who are we missing?
Teddy.
Teddy. Edward Ted Kennedy was born in 1932. He died in 2009. He was a senator from Massachusetts for over 40 years. I wrote lots of drunk driving, like a lot. Like imagine the most drunk driving.
Yeah,
That's where we are right now.
this guy's yeah, I have a lot of conflicting opinions about him, which are gonna make clear why they exist.
Yes. So he married a woman named Virginia Bennett. They had 4 kids. His daughter Kara died of a heart attack on a treadmill pretty young. She had cancer. I think another one of his kids had cancer as well. They got divorced. He obviously like cheated on her a ton, and Virginia was like really just like beaten down by like being the wife of a Kennedy. It doesn't sound like a fun job. It sounds pretty fucking terrible. And he actually had a second wife he married in 1995. Her name was Victoria Reggie. And they said that she helped him kind of settle down and like live out like the remainder of his life. And she is actually newly the ambassador to Austria. So Ted Kennedy's widow is now our ambassador to Austria. So it happened like literally this year. Here are the bad things. The first bad thing that is like not as bad, but like a whole thing. Ted was also in a plane crash in 1964. He survived, but he was in the hospital for several months with a back injury, and one of his aides was killed. So, I mean, don't get in a fucking plane with a Kennedy is my number one
Seriously.
piece of advice. And then the really bad thing was in 1969. So, 1969, Ted Kennedy is married to his first wife, Virginia, and he's also a senator. He was already a senator in Massachusetts. And he goes out to drink with his nephews and with his family. Actually, I think that I got this wrong. I think he went out to drink with his nephews the night that his nephew was accused of rape, and he's part of that story, but it's not this. This he went to a party in 1969 with a bunch of people, and he said he would drive a young woman named Mary Jo Kopechne home. And by all accounts, like she didn't really drink that much. Like I don't know if she like trusted him because I mean, he's a senator, and he, for whatever reason, drove her home. He crashes off of a bridge and into the water. He gets out of the car and he walks 15 minutes back home. He passes 4 houses where he could have stopped and called for help, but he doesn't. And he eventually, when he finally tells someone, they go and try to find her, but she's obviously dead. So Mary Jo Kopechne died in that like horrifying way. His wife had already had 2 miscarriages and was pregnant and had a third miscarriage after the trial. So it was just like super traumatic and horrible for everyone.
Wait, Taylor,
He ended up not being, yeah, tell me more.
there's a part of that story that's really, really bad. So like when the police finally got the car out and pulled her body out,
Hmm.
they found there was like scratch and claw marks on the roof of the car. Like she was very much alive when this all happened. Like he could have actually saved her.
Yeah,
And then another
he could have
piece of
saved her.
this that's incredible, and this I'm getting this from the last podcast episode of the Kennedys, was that apparently he went back to, I don't know, the hotel or condo, whatever he was staying in, and he called the manager to complain because the neighbors were being loud and playing music too loud. This night that this happened, that's what he
God.
did.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, he just killed someone.
yeah,
So he ended up not being charged, and he like offered to step down, but he didn't step down from the Senate. He paid her family $90,000, and they got $50,000 from insurance, but they didn't pursue it any further because they just didn't want to they just wanted to grieve in private, you know? Like it
yeah.
would have been just like a media circus. And then the last thing I read about this is, did you watch Succession, the show
Is that yeah, I've seen like three
on
episodes of
HBO?
it. Yeah,
Oh, well, spoiler alert, this happens in Succession as well, where a rich kid gets in a car accident and someone dies and his family covers it up and it's a lot and he's definitely traumatized by it and it's a whole thing. But it was obviously like about Chappaquiddick and I didn't see them. I know there's a movie about it, but I
there
haven't
is.
seen that. But it's just like it's like what the fuck are you talking about? If it had been anybody else, they would be in jail forever. You can't drunk drive someone off a bridge and kill them. It's
Yeah,
against the rules. But
yeah. Now
cool.
you know.
Well, that's all I got. That's it. That's the ninth and last of the Kennedy kids who none of them had a really great life. Despite all of their money and privilege, they were definitely, I mean, I don't know, obviously I don't believe in curses, but like it's a lot of tragedy for a family.
So, so when I think of dynastic American families, obviously the Kennedys are the very first one that come to
Hmm.
mind. Feels weird to
Hmm.
say it this way, but I now would probably categorize the Bush family as well, in
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
same similar vein. And interestingly enough, like it's just like they just don't have the same like you never hear about them like killing
Laura
somebody
Bush
or
definitely killed someone driving.
did she really?
Laura Bush did. Oh yeah, when she was younger.
No
But I don't
way.
know if she was drunk or whatever, but I know that that definitely happened.
Wow, okay,
But I
well,
think also like you said dynasties, yeah, look that up. I meant to mention like this is also ties into like Catherine the Great and like Genghis Khan and all things you're saying is like you cannot have a dynasty because you're gonna have dumb kids, you know? And like also if you try to have a dynasty, you're gonna have really traumatized kids. So like if Joe Kennedy is like, we have to win no matter what. We're super rich. We'll pay for you to get out of trouble because you have to win. Like that doesn't breed people who are going to not do stupid things, you know? Like
well,
it's just
yeah,
like hard to continue that. I don't believe in like a dynastic line. It's just impossible. Because you have like an idiot like I don't know, some of
I
these
would
idiots.
I would also say that I mean like with anything media related, there if there are amazing Kennedys, right, who like lived a great life and did great things and
Hmm.
I mean, I'm talking about the next generations removed from this. You probably don't hear about it
Hmm.
because it's not sensational, right? I mean,
Yeah, and they did do a lot of good things. You're right. Like the Special Olympics is huge. They did. There's like so many nonprofits tied to the Kennedys. That's all like really, really great. So they definitely did a lot of good, but they were like tragic and haunted. I think part of it
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Because
You should
yeah.
definitely not get. I mean, these people getting on planes, like, come on, guys. They just you have to have learned by now that that's just not a mode of
Oh my God.
transportation that's
Honestly,
accessible to you anymore.
even if you're like a person who's like, I want to buy my own little plane, like you better have made your peace with God because that's how you're gonna die.
I
Like
know.
you shouldn't do that. It can't be like a side hustle. Like you have to have an actual job. Especially
Yeah,
like the planes are like the JFK Jr. did the same thing that Kobe Bryant's helicopter pilot did, where they were like, "Oh, we're not using our instruments. We're only going to use visual guides, and it doesn't work in the dark or in the fog.
yeah,
You need an
yeah.
instrument. There's just like so many things that you're like, don't do that."
I kind of feel for Carolyn Bessette in that situation.
Me
So I
too.
was
She wanted to get divorced. Yeah.
I was I was casually glancing at her Wikipedia in the middle of this, and
Hmm.
it sounded like the media piece. Like I mean, she obviously knew who she was marrying, but I don't think that you know the gravity of it until you're in it. And she was just like
Hmm.
so not
Yeah.
about the media, so not about just getting paparazzi all over her. Like it sounded. I mean, maybe they were gonna get divorced for
Hmm.
other reasons anyways, but it sounded like that was a huge issue.
I think so. I think so. That reminded me, like in the book, they were like talking about how she couldn't leave her apartment because there's like paparazzi everywhere. And there's actually like one of the first like real paparazzi in the street pictures is of Jackie Kennedy. Have you ever seen that? It's
No.
like one where she was like walking out of a hotel and a photographer is like, "Hey," she turns and smiles because she thinks she might know him. He takes a picture of her and then she's like gets super upset. But that was like one of the first like street paparazzi pictures, before it became like everything. And I don't know if you've ever seen like a video of what it looks like from the other side of a paparazzi thing. And like it looks horrifying.
It
You have like
does.
100 people screaming at you and flashing in your eyes and all of that. So like that sounds terrible.
Yeah, my favorite is when celebrities lose it and break their stuff. That's always fun.
They should, man. I'd break
They
those damn
should.
cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I think they're
This is the
actually
longest
cursed.
episode of all time. Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know
I
if
don't
they're.
think so, but I do
Yeah,
think it's
I think when you're like when you do so much different, so when you do so many different things and you have the resources to do so many different things, bad things happen, right? Like I don't
yeah,
have a ski chalet in Aspen to go skiing, play football on. But if I did, maybe that's how I would
exactly.
die, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No. I've never been invited to play ski football.
Taylor, I do think that this is going to be like a 2 hour long episode.
It is. Well, great job. It's our 10th, so
If
good
you
for us.
stuck around long enough to
Um,
actually hear us come to a close, then good for you. We appreciate
oh
it.
my God, it's been so long. Thank you. Thanks, friends. Tell your
Um,
friends. Thanks everyone for
tell
the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for everybody who's listening and who's been providing that feedback and checking out our episodes, and especially rating us on all the apps. That actually seems to be really helpful.
Hmm.
So usually Taylor calls it out and we'll
Yeah,
call it out too.
please
So
do.
please do. Yeah.
Maybe
Well, Taylor,
you'll do it if Fars asks. Yeah.
maybe you'll do it as far as that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Taylor, we'll go ahead
Thanks, Fars.
and wrap up. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you, everyone, for
All right.
listening.
Thanks, everyone.